And on Wednesday nights, we'll continue our study with the Glorious Church. So it's a little bit more difficult for me, but I think more beneficial for everybody if we sort of do two things at one time. And that way we'll sort of mix it up a little bit. But this is a favorite book of mine, and I hope that this will be beneficial to me and to you as we talk about a faith that works. The letter to the book of James. I'm reminded of a fighter who was a boxer, and he was, in a pretty tough match, and he was losing pretty bad. So the bell rang, and he went to his corner, and his coach said, "I thought you said you could beat him with your hands down." And he looked at his coach, and he said, "Look, that's the problem. He won't put his hands down." The devil is a fighter. He is trying everything that he can do to make our faith not do what it's supposed to do so that we lose the battle. And what James does is pretty interesting. James sort of flips the coin over and says, no, you can win. Okay, you can keep fighting this battle. So that's kind of the idea of what this book is all about. Now, I want to introduce this book fairly quickly. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the introduction. If you want to get a commentary on the book of James and, talk about whether or not this is the brother of Jesus or, is this James the apostle? There's a lot of dispute on that. Now, my personal opinion, this is the actual brother of Jesus Christ who is writing this book. I think the evidence shows that, but there is some dispute among whether or not that is the case, whether it's James the apostle or James the brother of Jesus. So, I believe the author to be, of course, the brother of Jesus. The date of the book is written about AD 47. There has been a great persecution to take place. In fact, it has been going on for quite some time. Will somebody read James chapter 1 and verse 1?
James, the servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad in Greece.
Okay, to the 12 tribes, notice, which are scattered abroad. Well, the reason why they're scattered is because of the government. It's against the law to preach the gospel. In fact, it's against the law to be a Christian. So people were being killed. They were being thrown in prison. And they were scattered throughout different regions. In fact, Peter said they were scattered throughout Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, and other places. Okay? The theme of this book is faith in action. It really shows us how to put things in order, ducks in a row, I guess, if you will. The purpose of the book is to practice true religion, and the image, some people call it the Proverbs of the New Testament. It's full of wise sayings, and it's pretty easy to understand. All right, let's give a main verse in the book. Let's go to James chapter 1, verses 22 and 23. James chapter 1, 22 and 23. All right, well, somebody read that when you have it. Okay? So we got to be doers of the word. And to me, that's what makes a person successful. I'm reminded of a violinist. He would play the violin, and he thought he was doing such a great job. And his instructor asked him, he said, "Will you play that one more time?" And he played it again, and he was so into it, His instructor asked him again, "Will you play that one more time?" Finally, about the fourth time, he said, Didn't I do good?" Instructor said, "Well, you need to keep playing it until you get it right." This book helps us to do that. Because the truth is, all of us have the same problem. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Bible class teacher, whether you're an elder in the church, a preacher, a deacon, whether you're a new Christian. Every single person in this room is going to make a mistake. So you know what James does? He says, let me show you how you can avoid falling away from God. Okay? So, That's sort of the idea here in this book. This is the key passage. And of course, there are other important things that we'll notice in just a moment. All right. I'm reminded of a guy. He said this: I have had many things in my hands and I lost them. But whatever I place into the hands of God, I still possess today. You know, God will take care of us, and that is sort of the key of this idea. You look in verses 24 and 25, when he talks about the man that looked in the mirror, he beholds himself and he goes his way, and he forgets what he looks like. But one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, and being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. I think of another verse. I believe it's James chapter 2 and verse 12 about this perfect law. Okay, let me see here. Okay, look. Chapter 2, verse 12. He said, "So speak and so act as those who are judged," notice, "under the law of liberty." What's the law of liberty? The Word of God, yes. And to be specific, the New Testament of Jesus Christ. You know, you hear phrases in the religious world, they say, well, we're under grace, not under law today. Is that true or is that false? Some of you are like, yes. Because it's partly true. You know, I think a passage in, I think it's in Matthew, when he said, the law came by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. So how do you reconcile the two? Well, there is a law today. It is just totally different than the law of Moses. It is the law of liberty. So in chapter 1, you'll notice, okay, when you are a doer of the word, okay, not a hearer, you look into a mirror, and he calls that mirror the law of liberty. But who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres? The New Testament of Jesus Christ. And we will be judged by that law according to James chapter 2 verse 12. So that's sort of the key idea of this book. Key passage, right here. Key idea, the law of liberty. All right, any question or comment before we begin in James 1:1? All right, let's begin. James chapter 1 and verse 1. Somebody read it just a moment ago, and I think this is the way I'm going to outline this book. Now, it may change a little bit, but for right now, this is sort of going to be each chapter of the book, right? There are 5 chapters. So we'll talk about a faith that works in religion, faith that works in respect. That is respect out of people, by the way. We cannot have respect of persons, James said. Faith that works in responsibility, a faith that works in resisting, a faith that works in reclaim. So far, I think this is how I'm going to do this, but it may change as we progress. But at any rate, if you're taking notes, they might change a little bit later. Okay, number 1, the nuts and bolts of Christian living. Let's talk about chapter 1, a faith that works in religion. You know, people in the world, they say, you know, I don't want organized religion. You know, and I understand what they're saying. But it's hard to have Jesus as your Lord and not have a religion, an organized one. Because there are things that we are involved in every day. And what they're saying is they want to go to church and come home. And they don't want to have to worry about church through the rest of the week. James fixes that. He says, no, Christianity is on Monday. It's on Tuesday. It's not just on Sunday and Wednesday. Okay, so that's sort of the idea of this religion. All right, look here. Chapter 1, verse 1. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, greetings. What did James call himself? He didn't call himself reverend, did he? Or doctor. Or, you know, I think it's funny, and I don't want to sound mean or rude here, because I promise I'm not trying to be rude or mean, but I always think it's so funny to me when people don't call me Josh, they call me Brother Josh. You know, And no matter where I go, sometimes I'll meet even my neighbor or something. He's like, "Hey, Brother Josh," I don't necessarily want to be like, "Don't call me that," because I don't want to be rude. But I'll be honest with you, I feel a little uncomfortable. It's like, I'm just Josh. I'm a regular guy. I'm no different than any person sitting in this room. So I sort of don't like the idea of being called that, although, I'm not going to object to you. I'm not going to be mean. But I will say it does make me a little uncomfortable. Sometimes out of respect to people, I even call them brother sometimes, just to be respectful. So I understand where people are coming from, and I guess my point is, James had the right to really have a title. I mean, he was the brother of Jesus Christ. The master teacher, he was taught by the master teacher. But he just said, "Hey, my name's James and I'm a slave." That's it. In fact, you look at this word servant, that's literally what it means. I'm a slave for Jesus. Now, what's cool about this word is it literally is a bond slave. So in the New Testament times, this was very normal. In fact, it's nothing like what we had in our country, a very messed up system. But what would happen in the first century is a family would come to a wealthier family and they would say, "Hey, we will work for you if you let us live with you and you provide for our needs," and things like that. And it was really a fairly decent thing. It was more like an employer and employee relationship. I think what happened in our country was absolutely an atrocity. It was terrible. And thankful to good men like Abraham Lincoln and some others, we were able to abolish that. So this is what James is saying. I have voluntarily given myself as a slave to Jesus. So this is not something that was taken by force. This is not something where people are sold for property. It's not like that. James said, "Hey, nice to meet you. I'm a slave for Jesus." How do you apply that to your life? Let's give some verses. Let's go to Matthew 18. Matthew chapter 18. How do I apply that to my life? This word is found in these 3 verses I'm going to show you. I sort of went back to, I have this neat little book. It's a Greek concordance, and it's not like a regular concordance. What it does is, if you look up the number of a word, you can go to this book and find that number, and it'll give you every time in the New Testament that word is used. So I love this book. It's a very useful tool. I suggest that you get one if you do any kind of study. So you can go in your Strong's Concordance and look up the word and get that number, and then you transfer that number to this book, and it'll give you, and it's translated differently sometimes. That same original word will be translated differently, and it gives you every time that word is used. So I sort of went and looked at this word, and I found these 3 verses in Matthew chapter 18 and verse 23 through 26. You'll notice what Jesus taught here. "Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his doulos, his slaves." You know what that tells me? I've got to take that same word that James used for himself, and I've got to put it in my life. The number one goal for a Christian is to be a servant. And I'll tell you, I'm learning some things right now, especially in some classes that I'm taking. I'm shocked, and I feel like I may have missed it before. And I'll tell you, it's like burning in my bones how bad I want to preach some of these things, but I want to tell you, most people are not going to like it. I'm learning that if a man is not a slave for Jesus, if he does not consider his number one goal being a servant of God, he might be lost. And the more I'm reading about this subject, I'm terrified. I think, how do I get this message across without being arrogant, without being hateful? But I just want to tell you, friend, Jesus is saying He's going to give account to His servants. If I don't apply this to me, I will go to hell. That's what I'm learning. And I fully believe it. Well, I got my own issues. I'm not a perfect person, so I'm not trying to point fingers at you, but I hope you will look at it. I hope I will look at this and think to myself, this is the most important duty that Christians have, is to serve God. Think about Matthew chapter 20 and verse 28 when Jesus said, "He that is great among you, let him be your" what? Your doulos, your servant. Matthew chapter 25, his master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." You see the idea? Slave and master. That's the relationship that we have with Jesus. The good news is He will treat us far better than any other master in the world. The master of your job, he will make mistakes. The master of the eldership, they possibly will make some mistakes too. We've got some good ones, but they're not perfect. Every master in the world will fall short, except for one. And that's Him. Jesus the Christ. So, here's the application. When you introduce yourself to someone and you greet them like James is greeting the brethren, can you look them in the face and say, "I'm a servant of God"? Friend, that's tough. You know, if I'm not a servant of God, that's going to be hard. But I'll be honest with you, it's something you can change. It's something that you will rejoice in. And I'll tell you, you're going to fall short. I'm going to fall short a lot of times. We'll have to pick ourselves up off the floor. But I hope we can keep on going and say, "I'm going to keep serving God." That's James. All right, let's continue. He said, "James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes." Who are they? You know, I always wonder that. What in the world is he talking about? All right, what are your thoughts?
First thought is he's still talking to the 12 plus 11, 12 tribes in Israel.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it seems a little out of place.
I know. I was thinking the same thing, and my initial belief was that must be talking about the church. But then when I was studying for this, I was like, you know what? I think he's talking about those Jewish Christians that were converted to Christianity. I really do. But I think both of them can kind of apply here, and I'll share with you what I'm talking about. Okay, let me give you the first position. This was a position that I always thought, talking about maybe he's in reference to the spiritual Israel. Okay, not the nation of Israel, the spiritual Israel, the church. Let's go to Galatians 6. Okay, I'll give you 3 passages. One of these we'll read together, and you can write the others in your margin. But let's kind of try to figure out a little bit what's going on here. All right, Galatians chapter 6 and verse 16. All right, whenever you're ready. Okay, so he's definitely talking to the church, right? And he's talking about peace be upon them and the Israel of God. In my opinion, he's talking about the spiritual Israel, the church. Think about this passage, in Revelation 21, verses 1 and 2, he said, "I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." Now, what is that? That's the church, isn't it? Yeah, this is the judgment day, the judgment scene, and the church is meeting Jesus. The bride is meeting Jesus. It's like a big wedding, right? You move on down to verse 10. He said, He carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain. He showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. That's the church. Its radiance was like a rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates. Notice. And the gates have 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes. Well, that's interesting. So yes, there is a connection between Israel and the spiritual Israel, the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians. Now, I think we're seeing something come up here, and I'll reference it here in just a moment, but that was my view. The 12 tribes that were scattered abroad, to me, were Christians in the first century. But the more I was looking at this, it's very possible that he's talking about the Jewish brethren that were converted from Judaism to Christianity. So, it's a common theme. You know, that's not the first time he addressed Jews. The book of Hebrews, I mean, come on. The name itself, it addresses Jewish people. The whole book talks about Jewish things. And at any rate, it's pretty interesting to note. All right, any question or comment along that line?
But the book immediately preceding that, the epistle of the Hebrews, would be along the same line.
That's true. Yeah, maybe the people who compiled that sort of saw a connection there, probably. Yeah, I think you may be right. But anyway, I forgot to give you some applications. I hate to stop and back up, but I forgot to notice this, but I'll move on. Some applications to being a servant. He did not use religious titles. He wanted to be a servant of God. And in what ways do I want to serve? Those are definitely valid applications. So, all right, that's kind of the idea of the 12 tribes. Now, I want you to think about something that's happening in the first century, and I won't notice a lot of it, but when you start to read the New Testament, I want you to look at it from a new angle. Think about the people who are converted to Christ and the differences that they have. Okay? Think about this Jewish man who's been entrenched in the old law since he was a little baby. Okay? And I mean, he could quote the Old Testament many times, word for word. And all of a sudden, he's got a lot to change. This is hard for him. You know, he's very religious. You think about if you had to change everything religiously speaking. It's just not easy for this guy when he learns the truth. So he's going to carry a lot of baggage. You know, just because he's converted to Christ, he's probably still going to want to keep the Sabbath day. You know, he's probably thinking, man, that temple over there looks so good. And until it's destroyed, he's going to want to go there and worship. Okay, so he's got a lot of baggage, right? Then you have this other guy who is not anything like him. He's been a Gentile from birth. Maybe he was born in Greece. And he's entrenched with the teachings of like Socrates and, you know, mysticism, Zeus and all these Greek mythological characters. And he learns the truth and he obeys the gospel, and then all of a sudden they're in church together. You think they're going to have some different views? Yeah, they are. They're going to have some different views. So what you're finding and what I'm reading in the New Testament, I've seen this a little bit differently, is God is using the key to Christianity so that these two men can get to heaven together. What do you think that key is? Give you a hint. It's a 4-letter word. Starts with the letter L. It's love. Okay, it's love. Anyway, I'm not going to go into a lot of details on that, but I do encourage you to start looking at it. You know, it's just a different thing to me, something I've recently come to know. All right. Let's focus on the word greeting. James, I'm going to do this quickly before we move on to the next verse. We've got maybe about 10 minutes. He said, James, a servant of God, the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. Okay, that is persecution. And he said, what's up? That's the way I greet people, How are you? This word greeting is used, as far as I know, in this same word greeting only 3 other times. Okay? But I found these and I wanted to share it with you. I looked again at my little Greek Concordance and found out other ways that it's translated. And you could just write this in your margin. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But it's translated rejoice. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 16, when they saw the star, that is the star when Jesus was born. Remember the star in the east? When they saw the star, they rejoiced. That's the same word for greetings that James used. Matthew 5:12, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. It's the same word, rejoice. And then this one lastly, Matthew 18:13. If he finds it, truly he will rejoice over it more than the 99 that never went astray. This is the parable of the lost sheep. When he found that sheep, he put it on his shoulders, and it says he rejoiced. So that's what James is saying. He said, hey, my name's James, I'm a slave of Jesus. Glad to see all of you today. So that's kind of the idea of little first century versus the 21st century greeting there, okay? All right, let's move on. I want to get through verse, 8 today. All right, we've got just a few more minutes. There was a doctor that goes to a nursing home and he asked Jim, he said, Jim, what's 3 times 3? Well, Jim, he'd been having trouble for a long time. And Jim said, 59. Well, the doctor moved on to Mrs. Gray. He said, Miss Gray, what's 3 times 3? And she'd been having trouble for a long time. She said, Tuesday. He went over to Bob, and Bob's pretty sharp. The only reason he was there is because he couldn't take care of himself, but his mind was real good. He said, Bob, what's 3 times 3? He said, 9. The doctor asked him, and he said, well, how did you get that answer? He winked and he said, I subtracted 59 from Tuesday. When things don't add up, where do you turn? You ever thought about giving up on the church? I'm talking about something happened to you in your life that you said, I'm done. I don't even want to go to church anymore. Friend, I want to tell you today that if it hasn't happened to you, it will. Where will you turn? That's what James is writing about. He said, yes, I'm a servant of Jesus Christ and I want to greet you with rejoicing. But let me tell you something. There's going to come a time in your life. It may not be in the next 5 years. It may not be in the next 5 minutes. But if you serve God long enough, you will want to give up. Something will happen to you in your life. It may be a death of a loved one. It may be you find out you have cancer. It may be something, I don't know what it is. Here's what James said. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks the wisdom of what? The wisdom to get through that very difficult, dark period. If any of you lacks the wisdom to get through that period, he said, let him ask of God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. So I don't want you to raise your hand, but I want you to think about something, and I want you to ask yourself, have I ever thought about giving up on God? Friend, I'm a preacher, and I've thought about it. So you can't say, oh no, I'll never do that. I'd never give up on God. And if anyone in here ever gives up on God, I think that's just crazy. I'll be honest with you, somebody like that, number one, has a bad attitude and they got a bad memory. It's going to happen. It will happen. Peter did it. That's right. I mean, application after application after application could be made. When Jesus looked around, when he was carrying that heavy, huge piece of wood up that hill to be murdered, he looked around, and the Bible says, all forsook him. All of them. I can't sit here today and say I would never fall away from God. That would be the height of arrogance, and literally, I'm just going to say it would be stupid. It can happen to anybody. And I think James really sets the stage. He says, look, you can do it. You can make it through this time in your life, but you've got to turn to the right place. You know, if I turn away, not only am I not going to make it through spiritually, friend, I may never come back. You know, the Bible talks about people when they fall away, they may not ever come back. You know, I think about what Peter said. He said it would be better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than after they've known it to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. Well, the outward trials of faith. What do you think are some of these outward trials? Now, I'm not talking about inward, okay? That's addressed a little bit later in the chapter. So the King James, to me, is a little bit misleading here because it uses the word temptation. He said, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. But the idea literally is not something that happened inwardly to you, tempted to sin. That comes later. The modern translations, I believe, got it right when they said, the trial of your faith. In the context, these brethren were scattered abroad because of the persecution. That's what he's talking about. You can make it through this. I think sin would apply. You know, sin can cause you to go astray too, but directly that word, no, that idea is an outward trial. For instance, let's talk about some examples. In the context, I believe it to be number one. But there are other outward trials that could cause you to say, man, I don't know if God is real. They could cause you to say, I don't know if the Bible is real. They could cause you to say, I don't know if I should even keep going to church. And if you're human, you've probably had a couple of those thoughts in your mind, right? And I'll tell you what's happening. The devil is using these things to pull you away. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're saying, is God really with me? Should I keep being a servant of God if He's not even there? See, the devil uses this. Sickness, financial problems, marriage problems, family problems, the loss of a family member. Brethren can't get along. You're just discouraged. You see, these are outward trials that make you want to stay home. That's what James is talking about here in this chapter. It's interesting. He takes a weird approach. He said, look, count it all joy when you suffer outward trials because you are a Christian. You say, preacher, I can't do that. That is weird. What are you talking about? Well, think about this. You know, Matthew chapter 5 and verse 10, he said, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's what he's talking about in the book of James. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad. He said, well, how am I supposed to be glad when I'm mistreated? Because you've got a reward in heaven. And this is nothing new, you know. They've done this. They did this thousands of years ago. Acts chapter 5, you know, the apostles were beaten. You know, you picture that. You walk away bleeding and bruised and battered. The government has just literally put you in prison, beat you to death, and said, all right, now get out of here. And by the way, if we catch you preaching again, it'll be a lot worse for you next time. So they beat the apostles, and they charged them not to speak in the name of Jesus and let them go, and they left the presence of the council, notice, rejoicing. I'll be honest with you, something I see in our culture today, and I don't want us to go to war or anything. I don't wish bad things to happen, but I will tell you this. We have become so comfortable in coming to church with nothing happening. We don't have any persecutions at all from the government. We can just come here, enjoy ourselves, and go home. But in the New Testament, we read about people who literally gave their lives and died, who really went to prison. But we have it so easy that many times we miss this. And they were rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for His name. And every day in the temple from house to house, they ceased not to teach and preach Jesus. All right, thank you very much. We'll continue this next Sunday.